process of building these homes, that the constructors make sure they construct the house in proper way without mistakes, and that they are inspected during the building and not finding out for any market failure later on. Because then it's not value added.
Yeah. Okay. So we all agree with a sort of, let's say, factual expectation what should happen. They should do a good job. They should design it well, choose right material, and then next to the punishment based on the legal rule, we came up with sort of incentive package, be it with a reward or undecided yet. And so those are the outcomes of this exercise, which is in line with how the signs on the steering developed a sort of menu of possibilities. And I would like to present that menu to you right now. And that is the 5 C's. And it starts with the C we already met, that is the command. So the rule with a sanction. The legal rule, 1 milligram, and then a few rules further it says, if it is more, then you get a fine or other sanctions. So that is the classic one. And then there are 4 alternatives. And the second one is competition. That you create an incentive in the market that is an intervention by state, but it influences the choices of the competitor. As in, that you say, if you choose certain material that is sustainable and environmentally friendly, then you do not have to pay VAT. So VAT is the BTW, so the value added tax on all the goods and services you buy every day, you and me. And then, as a partnership that produces homes, you have a choice. You can, and the VAT is currently 21% in most states of the European Union. So you're not directly intervening in individual houses, but you leave it to the producers to choose sustainable material and be able to cut 21% of the price. Or that you're not choosing sustainable material, then your product is 21% more expensive. And that's then the competition. So either you're a brilliant marketeer and you have lovely clients who are faithful and then they stay with you, or you have price-conscious consumers, buyers from the product, the home, and the average consumer is price-conscious, and then automatically the consumers will go to the provider that provides it cheap. So that is a very important trick applied by states in many forms. Emission with cars, the same applies. You see it on the advertisement. So this 14% or 0% additional taxation because of the hybrid or electro nature of the car. That is basically not saying, please only produce electric cars. No. It's a sort of incentive and leave it to the market whether they want it or not. And still people buy polluting Mercedes and BMWs. But there are electric cars and it attracts part of the market, and then that is a way of other things than a punishment, stimulating electric cars or environmentally friendly and safe homes. Question?
In that case, do you also take into account that, for instance, the wood being used for building a house, there is the cheap wood, which might have taxes on it, but the more expensive wood, the green version, might might be expensive, or
Yeah.
more expensive to sell.
Yeah. No, so you could design it in any way you like. And so you could say the cheap or the expensive or the green or the sustainable or the blue or the red wood. So you can put any criteria in that type of arrangement. Then we move to the second one, or the third one, the consensus. And that is a very powerful one. That is the one where, as a state, you steer ex ante by putting all the stakeholders around the table. And ask the stakeholders, producers, consumers, wouldn't it be nice if the cost of medical treatment is reduced in an end, for instance, because it gets too expensive, so ultimately we have to close down hospitals, so that's a problem for everybody concerned. So let's together discuss these challenges, and please, you medical insurance coverage companies and medical providers companies, hospitals, talk to each other and find out a method to reduce the cost by yourself, self-regulation, and we states are awaiting the result and are not intervening with the other methods, like a heart surgery should be €100.20 and 30 cents, but leave it to the parties to decide in a coordinated way. Yes?
Can you give us a real time
And so this is a real-time example.
example? Yes, but
Or in the professional fields, for instance, attorneys at law, they are self-regulated, as in that all the attorneys at law are then member of a professional body, and the professional body, which is a private institution, is issuing rules of behavior and is having a professional supervisory board that can assess the behavior of attorney at law, like me, and can make decisions without state intervention. And then the only contribution of the state is that if you want to be an attorney in the Netherlands, you have to be member with that professional body. So you have to enter into a contract, cost me €2,000 a year, so this is my legal obligation to be member. And that's the intervention of the state, to make sure that I enter into a contract. And then the self-regulated body is taking care of the quality, and all the dysfunctioning attorneys at law are then removed, disbarred, by this self-regulated body. And I am member of the professional organization, so I can be elected as a chair, as a person who influences the house rules, and what is a correct behavior. I can use my own experience for that, in a sort of attorneys at law parliament of that body, sort of democratic, like a soccer club, but then with attorneys at law. And the same applies to physiotherapists, surgeons, accountants, funeral owners, name it. So self-regulation, where the state sort of triggers the suggestion like, maybe you should talk to each other and control your own quality, because you're not having an interest in market failure yourself, because the image of your branch, of your industry, will be negatively affected by the bad guys. So make sure that you control the bad guys yourself. And the word consensus is derived from the fact that I consent to become member of the professional body. Sort of consent because there's pressure from the legislator that pushes me to consent, but ultimately it's my signature. It's not by law. And so the cigarettes, it's not consent. It's legislator command should be 1 milligram. Sure, there's some lobbying going on, but at a certain stage, it's 1 milligram. and there's no room for negotiation. And if you fail to comply with the 1 milligram of the cigarette, you get a fine. So that's the command, and then the consensus is, I am member of the board of the physiotherapist or the funeral home owner and so forth, and then through self-regulation. The next one, the next one is communication. And that is the part I promised in the beginning of the lecture, that you make sure that the consumers have the correct information. So as a state, you can influence the education of your citizens. So you can subsidize schools, and then certain private behavior called sexual engagement can result in sicknesses, sexual diseases. So the state subsidizing school systems make sure that one class is on sex, and that certain information is provided to students, to kids. And then if people leave school, or not in school anymore, then you could use other channels. So as a state, you can buy advertisement time on television and make little broadcast advertisement that smoking is not good for children, or that drinking too much is bad for your health,
That would be Sieren in the Netherlands.
and in the Netherlands that is then Sieren. And then why do we call this part of this steering? We call this part of the steering because it's a state intervention, because it is state money that is subsidizing. It's not as if the church that thinks, please do this, or the Lions Club or the Rotary. No, it's the state that thinks, I see market failure. And one of the powerful correction mechanisms for market failure is the consumer. So let's reach out to the consumer and tell the consumer about rights, about dangers of certain products. And so in the financial service industry, the sellers of insurance policies, pensions and the like, investment possibilities, and there are websites on which companies are listed that are providing bad products, so that the consumers know, don't go there. And so that's the most extreme form of information, and we talk about that because that's basically essential. Yes?
But do they mostly do this from an ethical stand of view, or is it also just to prevent costs from piling up?
So the question is this done from a ethical perspective or other perspective? Very good question. So this relates to, let's say, the framework, the paradigm of this course, and that is twofold. We zoom in on, let's say, the functioning of the market from a sort of utilitarian perspective. So from a very down-to-earth perspective, is there market failure, yes or no? And then obviously, behind any legal norm, there is ethics. And so the community, so the whole idea that it is wrong to be injured and so forth, that is ethics. And so the answer is yes, but that coincides with the utilitarian, so the sort of down-to-earth perspective. How could we most efficiently avoid market failure? So if you educate your population with effective advertising that smoking is bad for your health, that is a powerful tool to avoid that market failure. And then parallel to that, so the message is all the C's are applied at the same time. So parallel to that, we have the rule on the 1 milligram per cigarette, and the rule on advertisements on cigarettes, which is not allowed anymore, and some other rules. So it's a total package, but the communication is part of it. Why? Because of the importance of the consumer. So if you stay in your office, your state office, and you talk to the producers only, and then the consumers do not have a clue. People think, well, smoking is cool, and why can I not buy cigarettes anymore? So you communicate. to the consumers, not to the producers. No sanction, no, just communicate. The last but not least, the code. The code is the promise of the 21st century, and that is basically the story of that you make it physically impossible that market failure occurs. And the best example I have, but that is not in markets, is the speed bump. So in a street, when you put a little bit additional concrete in sort of speed bump signs, then all the owners of cars reduce their speed. Because there's a lovely link between car owners and their car. They don't want to ruin it themselves. And the effect of a speed bump is that if you have too much speed, you ruin your car. So streets without speed bumps are very soft in speed. So you could think of, if you think that certain material is really bad, make sure that it is not traded in your territory. So put people at the border so that no ivory enters your industry, your market, so that no one can buy ivory and produce jewelry or something like that where ivory is used. But the science on regulatory state did not got its head around the code as yet enough. So we do not know yet how to apply the speed bump thinking on services. So how could you get sort of speed bump into services? And that's then your task to figure that out in this century. If it is working with cars on the street, why not in banks where they cheat the market? How could we create a speed bump in a market? I'm doing research at the moment to that topic. I don't have the answer yet. So that's why I call it the promise of this century. In the role of lecture student, this is a typical slide on which you can expect a multiple choice question. So what are the sort of 5 C's in the interventions from a state pertaining to a market failure? And this is another example of a list. So if you have the arrangement, step 2, who is then enforcing those legal rules or the competition and so forth? And then this first question is very simple. Who in the state, which civil servant or not civil servant, should be tasked with executing the control of the market? And we distinguish between 4 flavors. So you can have the primary officers of a state, as in ministers, European Commission, so the closest to the sort of top of the pyramid of the executive branch. That's 1. 2, you can have a separate agency, inspectorate, authority or regulator. So a entity that is not a minister, but it is on arm's length. A separate building with a separate chief, sometimes a separate legal entity, but it is completely state influenced, and the people are ultimately civil servants, but they do not report to the minister, but to the Chief Inspectorate of Healthcare, who has a sort of independent authority to make the control or market failure happen. And the third one is a private entity. And that private entity, for instance, a central bank, which is a corporation in most states, is then tasked with a piece of public authority. Or the laboratory on chicken diseases in Wageningen, which is a sort of scientific part of the University of Wageningen, who is then tasked by the state to keep an eye on all the chickens in the net. So sort of single, very clear-cut authority. Why? Because they know everything about chicken diseases, and they get sort of little subsidy. Okay, make this control happen, and every year report. Yes.
Is that similar to the Voedsel- en Warenadministratie?
The Voedsel- en Warenadministratie, so the Food and Drug Administration of the Netherlands and the EU, is an example of the second one.
Okay.
And so the most vocal ones are, so these ones you meet in the newspapers. And the third, they're a little hidden. They're very specialized. And so there's a company that is an expert. Well, I tell you next week. And then the last example are these self-regulated bodies, like the professional body of attorneys at law. So there is no state involvement, but through this consensus tool, the market regulation is outsourced to that private, the participants of the market themselves, and they do actually the execution. And the difference between 3 and 4 is that the central bank and then this chicken control agency is not producing chickens or financial services themselves. So there's a difference between the regulator and the regulatory. And with self-regulation, they are in one hand. Yes, questions?
The self-regulatory body could be, for example, inspectors in the McDonald's, from the McDonald's.
No, that is the chapter on the compliance officers. We come there.
Okay.
That is that within companies, so within market actors, you get officers who are internally checking the quality. But first we need to know who is on top of, who could ring the doorbell of McDonald's to inspect the quality. And only when you know who could pass by, it makes sense to design your internal organization accordingly. So that's on the week of the compliance. Because that is the same legal person as McDonald's. It's just an employee of McDonald's. And it's not an external. Time is running out, so what I would like to point at is that in the discussion next week we will look at how is this connection with the state organized, also from a democratic perspective. Who is financing and running these bodies? And so with the minister the answer is clear, but with the others, how is that done? And then how does it work that you can outsource this piece of state authority to such a quasi-state entity? How does it work? And then we will look next week, so we will continue this theme with how could we then sanction? And that is where responsive regulation pops in, and those two pyramids. So let us promise to each other that next week we start with those two pyramids. So this is your last call to actually read it, and that's already next week Tuesday. So that's close by. So it's almost 1 week, this Friday and next Tuesday. Yes?
It's the last reading, right? Yeah, exactly. But the score and sanction.
Yeah. So the Braithwaite, so the author is called Mr. Braithwaite from Australia, and his title is Responsive Regulation. And then we will touch upon it. Yeah. Okay, thank you for your attention. See you Tuesday, isn't it? Thank you.